The president calling out fringe elements that are here to take advantage of protest situations. It's the right call. They're bad actors. You got to root them out. Every police force says it. They're actually acting in very nefarious ways, secretive ways, organizing, bringing bricks, bringing incendiary devices. You saw the two lawyers that are up on charges for throwing a Molotov cocktail into a squad car that was full of officers. They had more Molotov cocktails in their car. It's not protesting. There's nothing positive about that. It should be called out. But ignoring why the real protesters, who are the overwhelming majority of everything we see everywhere, why they're there, and not addressing that pain and that hurt and that pattern that's gone on for generations, that's really wrong. And that guarantees we will be back here again, because this won't be the last abuse of power. We both know that. So what is the right way to speak? What are the right things to address? What will make things better? I know that's a huge task, and there are like 100 things, but we should be discussing it, don't you think? We shouldn't just be looking at pictures of the worst things every night, right? So let's bring in Angela Rye and move the bar at least a little bit. Hello, my friend. I have been enjoying your podcast from your home and the provocative discussions you've been having and the questions you've been taking on during the pandemic. I think you are a big fan of useful conversation. We need it now because nobody wants to see the need for this in this country, although you could argue this is the way things get changed, that if people aren't outraged and on the street and demanding things and causing this type of consternation, we've never had change in this country. But what is the way forward, Angela?
Well, Chris, I think our way forward involves a little bit more discomfort. The tough reality for so many people is that they have been crying out for so long. Chris, I remember when Trayvon Martin was killed, and we found out that George Zimmerman was not going to be found guilty, that he was in fact acquitted. I remember us staying up all night. We had these no justice, no sleep calls. And to be here so many years later in the exact same situation, not just for George Floyd in Minneapolis, but for Breonna Taylor in Louisville, Kentucky, and for Ahmaud Arbery in Brunswick, Georgia, and for Tony McDade in Tallahassee, for so many others, Chris, who never went viral and who don't have videos. This is the burden that we're carrying. And to compound all of that with what's happening with coronavirus, it is just maddening. And I am sitting here in front of you with like just a heaviness on my chest. I could feel the pressure all day. I was crying, and I would say for no reason, but there are for so many reasons. There are thousands of reasons for my tears. And they're all people who I haven't met, but we're bound together by a common thing called injustice that has been at the very foundation of this country for 400 years. And so here we are now trying to figure out how we're going to get justice in a place that has never given us justice. We continue to hold out hope for a space that has never really honored that. If we're honest, Chris, the biggest piece of legislation, the largest landmark legislation that has ever impacted Black America is the 1964 Civil Rights Act. We are years beyond that, and I wonder really how far we've come. Sure, we celebrated Barack Obama in 2008 and in 2012 when we elected not once but twice the first Black president. But this bigot in the White House now has now undone so much of that progress. So much of that progress, to the point where Barack Obama himself had to say today in his statement on Medium that protesting is the way to change. That we have to demand what we want from our elected officials, the folks who want our votes. We can make demands of them, and we should make demands of them. We have every right to hold them accountable. Donald Trump needs to be accountable for waste, fraud, and abuse, frankly, at this point, for the ways in which he's abusing military, for the ways in which he abuses his executive powers. And I really can't tell you what all of our options are, but what I can tell you is that we have to exercise every single one of them, that I'm going to be out here with people who look like me and the allies who want to stand with us for some people for the first time ever, even though they've sat through so many other police killings. I'm going to be making demands. I'm going to be pushing forth agendas. I'm going to be asking members of Congress to introduce sweeping legislation because piecemeal by piecemeal bills won't be sufficient.
But why?
Right? And
What
I
do you
think
say to
that's
people who
really
say
where
none
we
of it will
are.
be
If we're,
sufficient? It's never going to happen. Ro Khanna in the House, Kamala Harris, they want to pass laws about uniform standards of use of force analysis for across the country. Never happened. Policing is a state-by-state issue. The Republicans won't go for it. You don't have both houses. Obama tried with his commission. I had former Commissioner Ramsey on last night, who was part of the Commission on Policing. He was like, our report was all but thrown in the trash.
yeah.
This is America. The majority doesn't embrace the problems of the minority. They will never change. Why am I wrong?
Well, this is what I would tell you. You're not wrong. And that is the unfortunate reality. And until I'm right, Chris, this is the exact type of civil unrest that the country will not only continue to see, but to engage in. Dr. King said that riots is the voice of the unheard. It's the language of the unheard. So the reason for this outcry is because people are tired of being treated as invisible, as disposable, as voiceless, and as though they don't matter. We have been screaming Black Lives Matter for several years, and just now people are finally beginning to accept that as truth and not as an argument, not as a damn argument. We are not saying that we're better than you. We're saying that we're equal to you. That the nightmare that our ancestors lived through, that we were 3/5 and inferior, is not true. We're asking people to summarily reject that. It has to be rejected in policy too. And that is, I believe, the first frontier. We have to push for sweeping change because if we don't, we will die. That is the reality.
I
So it's
have
not about just an election.
I have one other thing for you. I
Yeah.
have like 100 things, but I have one thing. I don't like the term ally. It to me
No.
speaks to a remoteness. I'm not your ally. I love you. You're the TV family I choose. I have you on because I believe in you. I follow you because I believe in you. If somebody were to come after you, I'd be there for you. I'm not your ally. It's not out of convenience. We don't have a deal. All we have in this country is the bond of one to another. And I know it's not equal, and you know it's not equal. But we're supposed to fight for that together. I'm supposed to be fighting for that for you because that's what this country is about. That's all we have
Supposed
here.
to. But Chris, you're supposed to. And the reality of it is, for too many, it has been a choice that they've ignored for decades, for centuries. Family by family, it's been something that has been passively put off. And I don't know if the tipping point this time was that everybody was stuck at home in quarantine for coronavirus, and this was a victim, someone who was suffocated, that they couldn't turn away from. I don't know if that's what it was, but what I know is it's too late. And we have to take this moment to do something majorly radical to ensure that for future generations, whether you call yourself an ally or not, or a stand or not, whatever you decide to call yourself, that gap has to be bridged because our survival literally depends on it. And so I appreciate your allyship. I told you I've been crying all day. Maybe I'm also really glad that you got over coronavirus and happy to see you back. But I think that the reality of it is, Chris, it's going to take a lot. And it's going to stretch some people. It's going to stretch some implicit bias and some explicit bias. It's going to challenge the very foundation of white supremacy in this country. But all of that has to be uprooted. And it is going to be painful. But it's time for folks to be accountable.
It is, and it'll never change if white people don't make a change. It will never change. They have the power. Power changes culture. Power sets the tone. If it's not going to be electeds, it has to be other people who insist on it as a mandate, like we saw with gay marriage. That you saw private businesses saying, "Hey, you're not down with gay marriage. We're not going to support you in this state. We're not going to support you in this business because we got to be more than allies. I'm not doing you a favor by caring about your equality. That's what this country is about."
What do you call it? If it's not an ally, you said it's TV family. What do you call it for people
Well,
who
for
aren't
you and
TV
me,
family? Yeah.
we're countrymen. This is America. We're Americans. We fight for one another. It's all we got in this country
But
is our
Chris,
connection to
that
each
is
other.
an ideal. I think that the fundamental challenge for me is that is an ideal that is so far out of reach for my people. It sounds really good. it has never been attained. It has been
You're
attained
right.
in small instances, you know,
You're right,
like
because what?
on a micro level. But
Because people in power haven't made it their fight. That's what I'm
yeah,
saying. Is look,
I'm
am I going to
clear.
understand what it's like to be a black man in America? No, I don't have to. I just
Right.
have to understand that that's what happens to black men in America, and I have to decide that that's not what I want. That's a big reason I do the job. But until Americans in the majority see it as their problem because only they can fix it, we'll keep reliving these scenes, no matter how passionate the advocates are, no matter how good the arguments are. We could have a million Angela Rise. And as much of a blessing as I'd see that as in my own eyes, we need a lot more than that. We can't do it without you, but we need a lot more than that. The majority must make this problem their own. But Angela,
So what do you do? What do you do, Chris, when somebody says, "Okay, I want to be an ally. I want to be more than an ally." And you know that dismantling white supremacy is a part of that. That means accepting that white privilege is real. What's the first step to doing that to the people that are reaching out saying, what do we do if they're in positions of power?
let's embrace the 12 steps. First thing you got to do is recognize you got a problem. We're not even there yet. We got a president tonight, didn't even mention the problem, Angela. Did not mention the problem, other than to say, if you are out there demonstrating against the problem and not, on knees with your hands folded in front of your face, you are the problem. We have to acknowledge that it is a problem that is holding us back in this country, that is limiting our resources, that is our life's blood. We're not making the most of everything we have in this country. And if you don't do that, if you don't harness your diversity, meaning, not just color, but color, creed, and sex, if you're not harnessing them all, you're not going to be what you need to be in this country. It is literally existential for us. And you
And
have
I
to
get that.
you have to admit you have the
I
problem.
get that. I want to know for you. It's like, so you're like dead set on like, we are TV family. I got your back specifically. But what about the black person, Chris, that you don't know? What's the thing that you're gonna do with your position of power to make the road easier for that protester who you may have the least in common with? What about that person?
I think my show has to become something that talks about this when there's not someone dead in the street.
Yes.
And that's hard because people don't want to watch. But you know what? I don't get watched that much anyway. So I don't really have that as a defense. You have to do it because it's the right thing to do. You can't just do it when somebody's dead. I know that sounds like, yeah, no kidding. I don't do it now. We do not do it now. I do not have pieces. And look, I know my show and my team goes out of its way to fight these fights. That's why the show was created. But it's still not enough. And that's one thing that I can do that I don't do now. And I will. That I can control, that I will do. Angela, I got to jump.
You know I'm gonna hold you to that.
Yeah, good. You'll be a part of it.
Thank
That's
you.
easy. Good. You just said yes to coming on the show more. This is a win-win, as we call. Thank you, Angela.
I appreciate you. You know that. And I'm so glad you're well.
And I need the accountability. I know I can always trust where your criticism is coming from. It's always coming from a good place. It's not about agree, disagree. It's all about hearing it. And I always will.
That's right.
Be well. God bless.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris.